pages in the Federal Register. Nobody could possibly read and understand these, and yet through every presidency, they add thousands and thousands of more pages, thousands and thousands of bureaucrats running around regulating us. And most of these bureaucrats have guns. I don't believe your guns should be regulated, but I believe the guns of the bureaucrats ought to be regulated. The test we had, I thought, was very successful, but because we lost our way, we thought we could get something for free. But there's nothing for free. Now, people who see their economic freedoms threatened and understand, low taxes, low regulations and all, how they could be prosperous again. But there's another part of freedom that I think that we have to be concerned about. After 9/11, we have been told incessantly that now it's necessary to sacrifice your liberty to be safe. I don't believe that for 1 minute. You do not have to sacrifice your liberties or your privacy in order to be safe. There is an important part of our Constitution that we should know and understand that helps make you very safe. It's not because we have policemen at the front of our doors and policemen out on the streets doing their best, but they don't make you safe in your home. Probably the best safety feature that we have in this country is the clear understanding of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, that's great.
In this age where we drifted away from believing in ourselves, and believing in freedom, and believing in the free market, and believing in sound money, we have also changed our ways over these last 100 years in what our role in the world should be. I think it's a very important question to ask, and it's very important we come up with the right answer. And I have a precise answer for that, because I don't like our role in the world today, because I think we have been endangered. I don't believe we or you should have to be the policemen in the world, sacrificing for the world. I think it's time to bring our troops home from around the world. It's an economic necessity, and actually I believe we'd be much stronger for it. I do not believe us being in 130 countries, in having 900 bases around the world, being involved in entangling alliances, and interfering with the internal affairs of other nations, I don't believe that does us one bit of good. Economically bringing the troops home, think how quickly just bringing the troops home and having all the troops spend their money here in our home, instead of in Korea and Japan and Germany and the Middle East, it would be a benefit to us all. Reason, especially since the World War I came on, we have felt very strong that we had to go. And most of the people who endorsed it was always for, it is up to us. We are a good country. We are a great country, and we should impose our will on others and teach them how to be good Democrats and teach them how they should live. But the whole thing is, you can't do that with force. The only way you can spread our goodness is by setting a good example and get other countries to want to emulate us. Then we can spread our goodness. Generally speaking, the presidential candidate that speaks for peace is very likely to win the candidacy. Last go around, who was seen as the peace candidate? Actually, it was Obama. And right after he was elected, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. It was magic. But then he went and started 3 more wars. And didn't even ask the Congress about it. What did President Bush do when he was a candidate in the year 2000? He was for criticizing the previous administration. He said he wants a humble foreign policy. He wants to stay out of the internal affairs of the nation. He wants to get out of this business of nation building. But what happened after that? All of a sudden we were involved even more so. And during the Korean War, the peace candidate at that time was Eisenhower. enough in Korea. We're not winning, and we don't know when we're going to win. It was an undeclared war. So Eisenhower was elected. Same way with Nixon. He was elected because of the war started in the 60s to try to end that war. But I think the big problem is that we, as a people and as a Congress, have failed to follow the rules. We have been instructed, the law is explicit in the Constitution, we should not go to war without a declaration of war.
Right.
That is if a war is declared, we should know who the enemy is, we should all be behind it, the Congress should support it, the people should support it, we should go fight it and win it. That is essentially what happened with World War II. We were attacked, and Germany declared war against us in less than 4 years. Both those powerhouses militarily were defeated. And here we are because we don't know why we're in Afghanistan. We're not even sure why we're in Iraq, or why we're bombing Pakistan, and why we're bombing Yemen, and why we were so involved. Because it goes on endlessly. The one thing is, if you have a declared war, you know who the enemy is, and you can win the wars and get them over and stay out of the unnecessary wars. That, to me, is so important. Most Christian nations get tempted to spread themselves too much around the world, even in ancient times. And it's usually those foreign interventions that brings those countries down to their knees. That is exactly what happened with the Soviet system. I was drafted in the military in the 1960s during the Cold War, and that Cold War, ended. But it did end. We didn't have to fight. All those nuclear weapons. Just think, the Soviets had like 40,000. We had 30-some thousand nuclear warheads. Today, we fret more of the possibility of one nuclear weapon going into somebody's hands someday, and we want to start a war over that, and yet we were able to stand down the Soviets. But how did we win that? We won it, in a way, by default, because the Soviets brought themselves down. They had a flawed economic system, and they went into no other place other than Afghanistan and got bogged down. You'd think we'd learn a lesson. And if we don't learn it soon, we're going to get bogged down, and we're going to come home, and I will win this argument about bringing the troops home, but unfortunately it will be under more dire circumstances. But that's generally what happens in history. Is countries spread themselves too much around, and then they have to go into bankruptcy. It is a big economic issue. There are estimates now that the wars in the Middle East since 1971 is up to $3 trillion and climbing. And that isn't even counting all the tragedies. All you have to do is read the stories about the tragic results of service people coming home without arms and legs and visions and brain injuries and the deaths that have been involved. And we don't even know exactly why. I am also convinced that we are more threatened by being over there. We are not less threatened. I cannot buy this argument that if we go over there and kill a lot of people, many times innocent people, that it's going to make us safer here at home. I think that we should take the advice of the founders, we should take the advice of Eisenhower and other Republicans and say, look, non-entangling alliances, get along with people, trade with people, and try to be friends with as many people as possible. And one way I would stop the entangling alliances is, why in the world do we have to be entangled in the United Nations and NATO and having them dictate to us when we go to war? I get out of those. Randolph Bourne, who wrote during World War I, wrote a book called War is the Health of the State. I believe that. War engenders, a patriotic fervor and a willingness to sacrifice liberties. And we've been doing that these last 10 years with the so-called war on terror. But what I see as the great danger is when the state grows, the war atmosphere and attitude allows the state to grow, undermining our personal liberties. And that's where I think we're really losing it, and we have to understand it. There's a lot of support still in Washington and around the country for the Patriot Act. I don't think the Patriot Act has added anything. This doesn't mean we shouldn't have security and watch and things, but there are different ways of doing it than making you, every place you go, look like a possible terrorist. That doesn't help. That punishes you as it doesn't get the terrorists. So I would say that it's time we re-look this whole thing that's going on at the airports, re-look this Patriot Act, and make sure your privacy is protected, and make sure if there's a whistleblower telling us what's going on in our government, whether it's in the military or whether it's in the financial community, that they are not treated like the scumbags that they generally are. We want to know what the government is doing. That's our job. We want our liberty back, and we want government to be accountable. People ask, well, it all sounds good, but where are you going to cut, and how is this going to work? There's so many people to be taken care of. I have adopted a philosophy where if you want to work your way out, you can. Sometimes I don't think we're going to be able to, but we ought to have transitions. We ought to know whether, let's say on medical care. There was a good slogan when Obamacare came out. Some wanted to repeal it, which I voted against and would, but at least you want to have the right to opt out of it if you don't like it. To be forced into something like this is going to bankrupt our country. It shouldn't be that way. You should have the right to a medical savings account and assume responsibility for yourself. And I think we should have that all the time. In education, we should have that option. In education, now we've moved in the wrong direction. The quality of education has gone down and skyrocketed in cost. So what has happened in the last 56 years? Federal governments come in. Now, where in the Constitution does the federal government get the authority to run our public school system? The Constitution does not prohibit the public school system by the states, but it does not give the authority for the federal government to interfere. So we ignored the Constitution. We created this monster Department of Education, and the quality of education goes down. Now, why I see this so bad is not only because it costs a lot and you get bad education, is why did we, all of us, allow our government to do that without changing the Constitution? If you want the government in public education, amend the Constitution. But if you can ignore the Constitution and allow the government to do that, what other part of the Constitution is worth anything to us? That's what's happened to the war power resolution, the war power. Because we just allowed presidents since Truman went to war under a UN resolution in 1950, we've ignored that. So once you allow that to happen, the Constitution is out the window, and I'm afraid that's where we are today. I believe most of our problems have come because we have not had the individuals in Washington and the determination of their American people to send those individuals that would obey the law of the land. And that, I believe, is where the answers can be found. If we got into this mess in foreign policy or monetary policy or spending policy or violation of our civil liberties because we don't follow the oath of office, why wouldn't the solution be sending only people to Washington who know and understand what the Constitution says and you believe they'll uphold their oath of office? The difficult subject of monetary policy, there's no authority for the Federal Reserve. They've messed things up, and people are starting to realize it. They've created a monstrous system around the world because we've been issuing paper money. We're the reserve currency of the world. All other currencies build on our paper money. But this is not going to be easy to change. It's likely it's going to blow up in our face, and that is with runaway inflation. This whole thing comes apart, and that'll be very, very dangerous. But in the meantime, it would be very difficult just to take the key and turn it and close the Fed down. There's too much that depends on it. So what I would like to do, and I have a bill that would do this and would promote this if elected, and that is to allow competition. Competition with what? Like American silver dollars and American gold dollars. Just use them. Today, if you do it, you could end up going to jail. There's been a couple who have tried it. If you try to use gold and silver, you go to jail. And they say they're counterfeiting. Well, who's the counterfeiters? It's the Federal Reserve or the counterfeiters. want to do it in secret. This is the reason why if we ever exposed them, I think it would come to an end. That is why I work so hard trying to get an audit of the Federal Reserve to find out